Thank you all for joining us. We're for our next installment of our summer series at NEC. My name is Andrea Kalyn. I'm the president of NEC, and I am truly honored today to have three amazing folks with us from NEC's Contemporary Improvisation Department. First of all, Rand Blake, who founded the CI department when it was actually Third Stream back in 1972. Dominique Eade, who is our voice professor in jazz and CI, as well as an alum, and Hankus Netsky, who is the current co-chair, also an alum as well. And Hankus, I don't even know how to categorize you. So composer, scholar, instrumentalist, truly phenomenal person all around. So thank you for talking with us today. Ran, I'm wondering, we talk a lot about innovation in this moment, and we're talking a lot about social challenges of all sorts. And I'm wondering if you can start by just telling us a little bit about the history of the CI department and what NEC was like when you started.
When I arrived in 1967, really doing some slightly boring jobs, but very exciting to deliver mail, get to know the faculty. Within a few months, Gunther Schuller had opened a jazz department, the first of its kind in the country, and also Gunther with Carl Atkins and this wonderful, brilliant Kay Nurse. We had a wonderful 5-year experience of dealing with the community, visiting nursing homes, sending music to people incarcerated. The department also was unique as being the only one which really celebrated the ear, and all the skill building took place through the ear and not reading music. Of course, this has happened for centuries in Asia and Africa, but not in an academic institution. Quite a bit of the repertoire at the beginning I introduced to students. These were pieces I have known since childhood. And then when Dominique Eade, Hankus Netsky, and Peter Rowe joined the department, Dominique had her own brand of teaching. Hankus really brought us up to date with all kinds of influences on Jewish music, plus a deep knowledge of jazz. And Peter Rowe, historian, performer, made us really appreciate the values of Asian music.
That's really wonderful. Thank you. And we're, of course, just so grateful for that legacy now. And we're seeing it all, come to fruition in a different way. Dominique and Hankus, well, all of you really, I'm curious as sort of how this moment, from global pandemic to really dealing socially with racial inequities, to all the kind of concerns of the day, how you have been finding that intersecting with your work and sort of informing the work of the department over the last few months?
Well, I feel like this department can really be a model for music in the 21st century. It was really quite, way ahead of its time in 1972 to start a department like this. But really what was going on there was, it was a very inclusive kind of 21st century model, really seeing all of music as a continuum. And I think in this moment, it's very important to look at things that way. And it's amazing in a sense that didn't happen a long time ago everywhere, but it's sad. But Gunther Schuller was very prescient because he lived in New York in the 1950s, and he looked around and he saw the music scene, and he saw that it was inclusive in these various ways, and that the music schools didn't reflect that. All they did was really take an approach where they put music in specific boxes and looked at classical music as if, for example, jazz musicians and world musicians weren't listening to it. And of course they were. What Gil Evans and Miles Davis developed was based on Debussy in a huge way. And they also didn't see the African contribution to music as something that somehow was the major event in all of music in the 20th century. Instead, they looked at pitch systems, which were also important. But there's a way that this approach really, the time has come very much. And I think that's really the key to, to what we can bring to the school at this time. And Dominique, I don't know if you have something specific to add to that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that rings true with my experience, first being a student at NEC and then going on to teach for many, many decades. And, I had an interesting conversation last night with some alumni, an open conversation on Facebook about race and gender and who are the gatekeepers. And, I was thinking about my role at NEC. I can't not be a gatekeeper. I sit on panels that says this person's going to get in and this person will not. But I reflected on that and thought, it's really important to constantly ask the question, do I want to open this gate with the path of least resistance and keep the status quo? Or do I need to keep asking, what are our values? What are my values? And how does the institution reflect that? And that's really ongoing. I think as prescient as Gunther was, we've all had work to do through the decades to continue to improve our perspective and to have the institution reflect our values. So this is a really important moment for that. I think speaking of the ear, our ears are open. We have a president who's really listening to the tenor of the times, and I agree that the CI department is really well placed to embrace this feeling, this idea of inclusivity. But we are now in a time where we're not meeting together in person as much. And I think the challenge is going to be, insofar as we've learned to value community in a large sense, but also smaller communities and valuing what those, rather than kind of whitewashing and extracting those elements out to get a kind of universal language, Esperanto or whatever. What was it called? Remember Esperanto, right? So instead of that, we're kind of seeing there's all of these, small biodiversities, little
like micromusics, they've been called.
What's that?
Micromusics is what we call
micromusics. Yeah, ecosystems that there's no reason we can't have those flourish while teaching musicianship. Musicianship doesn't need to strip those things away. But a lot of that exists by people coming together, sharing community. And so our challenge, I think, right now is to make that community happen, regardless whether we're meeting only sometimes in physical spaces, in these next few months, or for some of our foreign students, maybe not at all.
So let's go to the kind of the sort of pragmatic reality that was the end of the spring and then sort of moving into the fall. How did things change? How did your teaching change? How did the student work change? How did you all navigate that moment?
I was very pleased to have the skillful help of Aaron Hartney, who could engineer with his brilliant use of photography and lighting the classes. I also know, Andrea, you want to hear a positive thing about
sure.
what has happened. And I found students, as much as they disappointed performing live for audiences, and as much as we all miss seeing each other in a classroom, they were able to produce some wonderful solo art and really having a little more time for solitude. So I found that very, very encouraging.
Ran, I'm curious, just to before Hankus and Dominique speak, I'm curious, though as you talk about the ear, right, and so much of your work is about the ear, how did that go over when you have issues with latency and just technological issues? Did it hone it, or did it impede it? I'm curious about that.
I don't know if there was a great deal of change. We always have had some people that complain about this work. It takes a lot longer to listen to Mahalia Jackson, Chris Connor, or Abby Lincoln, or Monk, and to hear the melody when people are used of having music in front of you. Many other people did appreciate this, and I constantly hear from alums that they can remember music from 20 years ago. So I don't, when we got the online classes going this spring, a great deal of the skill learning had already taken place earlier in the year, earlier in the semester. So I don't have up-to-date information on how that translates online.
Great.
Yeah.
And Dominique, you've got a particular issue, right? Because you've got voice. So there's
Yeah, I am. On the other hand, I do feel maybe piano sometimes is more difficult to record because there's so much more going on sonically. Um, I was continuing in the spring with students that I already knew, so I feel like I could fill in what the audio wasn't giving me, or even just the limited viewpoint that I had on students if I'm working on technique and looking at things physically. But I did start over the summer with a couple of students that I have not met in person before, and I'm amazed how much they have improved. So, for instance, I'm not the biggest audiophile. I don't have the newest sound system and everything, and I never have been that particular because I feel like my ear can fill in, and I think that's true in this regard also, that I know the voice well enough and I know sound well enough that I can tell what's going on and guide the student even though it's through speakers and not live.
Yeah.
so
I would just add to that. We teach oral traditions through oral transmission, so it can be done live. But a lot of it is listening. It's really what Dominique says is so important because, again, if your modus operandi, I mean, let's face it, musicians in the world basically learn by listening to other music on recordings or live. And that has been going on for over 100 years. And we can do that from our houses very similarly in a way. The thing that I would tell students that I notice with students is what I worry about is their own isolation. So just like if you look at Rand's background right now, you'll see Dector, his cat. And I got to know so many cats last semester. A lot of these students got cats for the very first time, in fact, and those cats were at their lessons, and those cats were in some cases the only people they saw. And we have to be careful with that. I think that was probably the biggest difference. I mean, for me, it also, you adjusted. You weren't leading an ensemble where you were all playing together at the same time, although actually some of our very innovative faculty have been solving those issues. It's really great so that we can play together, especially Ian Howell and David Zoffer have really been working on that. I teach a lot through call and response, so you can do that way. You can have people make solo pieces where they would have normally been ensemble pieces. You can have duos, and you can record a track in advance and then have somebody try to add something to it. And how do you accompany somebody and work on those kinds of issues? Or issues, especially if you're playing music with a drone accompaniment with just like one note for a while, that's rubato, that's just out of time, then it's beautiful. You just go around a circle and work on that. There are plenty of things that you can do in online teaching. And, I tell my students, I have to say, if they're thinking whether to come back next semester, one, you don't have any gigs, so you're not going to get distracted. It's a great time to be a hermit. And two, you're going to need that degree because, who knows when this might, interrupt your touring season again. It would be great to have a home base, whether that's at a elementary school, a high school, a college, or a music studio where they're teaching online. you're going to need that, and this is a great time to get it.
So how are you all thinking about the fall then? So that just leads beautifully into the fall, and sort of what do you see as the kind of opportunities? We're very much in hybrid mode as a country, as well as an institution. And so how are you, how have your perspectives maybe changed or honed or doubled down on, you know, how are you thinking about the fall for students?
I mean, I think of it as a continuation of what I think a lot of us were doing very successfully in the spring. And the key has been, for me, actually, it's been a continuum, because one thing that happens when you go online is the boundaries disappear in a lot of ways. So actually, a lot of my classes, I just kept going all summer, kept in touch with the students that say, hey, can we keep doing this? That was very interesting. And because of that, you know, this is the fall will really be somewhat of a continuation, but a lot of us are much better prepared. We've had more training, more Zoom training. We're about to have a meeting, in fact, I think it's tomorrow, where we discuss music software that will help us teach. I got myself an iPad so that I can use that iPad pencil on a piece of manuscript paper, you know, things like that. So it's you know, really a question of adjusting to this technological situation. I do want to say that I see a lot of people. It was very interesting, actually, planning for the fall, in a sense. As soon as we had to do a test for the new students for CI, and that's a very creative test. That's a test where the students need to you know, you play something and they sing it back, or they write a line. The technology that's out there is not prepared for that. It's actually very interesting. So that as students move technologically into the future and all these people develop software, they're developing software for very uncreative schools and very uncreative programs. And I see that. There's a big opportunity if somebody wants to actually take on what musicians need for technology in a more creative approach. That would be great, because we were not able to find anyone who could help us with what we need to do in terms of training musicians through oral tradition, really developing their ears. It's all, you know, it's all based on multiple choice, chord voicing, standard chord voicings. What in the world is a standard chord voicing? Hey, Rand, what's your standard chord voicing? I mean, it's ridiculous what's out there. So, I mean, creative, there you go.
There we are.
I mean, so it's fascinating. But I really feel like what we're doing in this department is simply looking at what creative musicians do, in sharing their cultures, in looking at what's actually going on. I mean, Kendrick Lamar won the Pulitzer Prize already like 3 years ago. You know, I mean, things have changed, and we need to really, really be, training these musicians to do their best in the current environment. And one thing I've been doing a lot, it's funny, I have a nephew who's a wonderful indie rock musician, and I've been playing 5 different horns on his record, putting on horn tracks. That's how musicians work these days. This kind of thing is not necessarily done in person. There's musicians in New York making records in LA, and that's been going on for years.
Well, that leads actually into another question, which is, how do you all see the profession changing as a result of, the profession is always evolving and always changing, and technology certainly has had an impact on that. But in light of COVID and the issues there, but also in light of, social senses and understandings and constraints, how do you see the profession changing?
I'm wondering if our alums won't need to consider another career, as well as music, such as business, engineering, maybe even a chance to write a novel or a solo sonata. But I'm also speaking outside music, and that may be mandatory. And I think New England Conservatory, it's very exciting that we've engaged Mark Goldstein to do a course on computer science and related math, And I think all these types of additions will really help arm our students for the future.
Dominique, you spent a lot of time thinking about, oh, sorry, Hankus, go ahead.
No, Dominique should go.
Did you have
I
a
was going to say
question?
you spent a lot of time thinking about, yeah, I was thinking you spent a lot of time thinking about on strategic planning committees, thinking
Yeah.
about this very question as well. I'm curious about your perspective on
Yeah, I
where we're
mean, it
going.
has accelerated certain things that we were thinking about. I think, there were a lot of things changing culturally even before the pandemic. But I was thinking in a way a little bit more specifically about the challenge of, and this goes a little bit to what Hankus was talking about with just the cookie cutter um, pet, pedagogical
Pedagogical.
pedagogical stuff that he was referring to. And I think also um, because we're going to go through so much through computers, to not let that commandeer our sense of aesthetics. Even just visually, I hope for improvements in terms of how things, we could look in a semicircle right now instead of in squares, or, and the language that we're adopting. I just think that's going to be really important for the arts to keep its presence through this process, because we're not just data collectors, we're not just data receptacles. We need to keep the creative, curious, inventive, imaginative spirit alive, and it will be a challenge to do it in this setting, but it's more needed than ever, I mean, in my opinion.
Well, the thing is, we have a very DIY department. Our students are very aware of the collapse of the music industry, which happened a while ago, actually, but now they're really struggling, because what's going on is now, if a musician has a really great video that they made at home, it's like everybody's seeing it. And I mean, I just did a lecture last week on a fairly obscure topic, which was Jewish wedding music in Philadelphia in the 20th century. It's already had over 1,000 views. Now, if I did that at a bookstore, there would be like 30 people there, maybe. And, the fact is that students have to find their audience. I mean, it's more imperative than ever, really. What they really need to do is they need to be the business savvy is nothing different than it used to be, in my opinion. In other words, if somebody says to me, as they did 2 days ago, hey, I want you to do a lecture for our museum. We usually get 17,000 viewers. We'll pay you $200. I go like, I'm sorry. Do you understand what's wrong with that sentence? Because we have to realize that if music is going to be online, or we're going to be online, or we're going to be playing our concerts online, no, you want to get a decent fee. But I found this summer to be very busy with those kinds of events. And guess what? That's going to continue in the future for sure. I mean, that will continue. And because of that, a feeble video of somebody playing like the first song they wrote on their guitar going out there is maybe going to be a problem rather than an asset. It's more important than ever for musicians to really get their skills and their creative abilities together, and get the kind of education that a versatile musician needs in a global society. And that's why I feel like what we do is more important than ever. And then you build your audience and you get your music out there one way or another.
How do you, what advice would you give to students as they go through, or let me ask this way first. How are you building those sorts of things into the education now? I mean, you do it anyway, it's very much part of CI, but are there ways in which you're amplifying that message, that sort of the kind of ancillary training for students, that sort of, tacit training that comes with that? Are you making that more overt? How are you thinking about that?
Yeah. It's very basic, honestly. I mean, I'll jump in just because I had to do this last semester, and I had students who had never used GarageBand. So GarageBand is sitting there on all of their computers. You've never used GarageBand. Guess what? Here, click on GarageBand. That's the record button. Here's how you add a track. You can learn it in 5 minutes, honestly. And then these students were, wow, I can't believe I never used this. Everybody in my ensemble had to make a video of themselves and send it in. And then Alex compiled those videos and David made it into Alex compiled the audio tracks. David from the advancement office, I believe, made them into videos. And then Andrea showed this at commencement, this video of my ensemble. And some of those students had never done anything like that before. Some of them had done plenty. They show each other, I show them, we give them some guidelines. The technical skills are really a matter of reading a manual in a lot of cases and pushing some buttons. But when you push that button, what goes on that video better be good. And that's really where our education comes in my opinion.
So yeah, exactly. And to that point, I guess, how are you, I mean, you've all been performing online. I've seen all of you, putting things out in an online way. How is that how do you think about that as a different stage? I'm sort of aware that online is now a stage, right? That our students have to perform on. It's one more stage. How do you adjust for that? How do you think about your audience when you can't see them?
I think, Rand, you've put some really beautiful things on there. What I love about what you've done is that it's very inviting, informal, and yet it has an aura, which I think doesn't always happen. Sometimes you're just kind of like, I don't necessarily want to be let in, but with what you present, I mean, it's lovely. The setup, it's minimal, but it's inviting. And I wonder how you feel with your performances, which I've so enjoyed seeing on Facebook.
I think it's wonderful to have the chance to record at my home with my four-footed brother often joining the music, and to think of some pieces that might relate to one segment of the audience and then the chance to do other types of music, and sort of a chance. I'm working on a Suite 2020 to be able to add a movement every other week or two at a time, and challenge the listener to praise or condemn the work, and to make programs that are from 15 minutes to 35 minutes. How do you find it, Dominique?
I've done very little. One of the things that I have been doing is taking the chance to look at videos that I have made in the past and haven't done much with. So that's where I've been putting my energies rather than doing much performance in computer spaces. I am getting set up better to do it though, so hopefully I'll be doing some soon.
And Hankus, you've done a lot of this. I've seen.
I've done a lot of it. I mean, I found it very scary at the beginning, honestly. I have not been a solo performer very much over the years. I've done a lot of things, a lot of arranging, a lot of duos, a lot of band stuff, but I really had to think about that. That was a challenge for me, and what's that, Rand? It's about time. Thank you. He said this to me 45 years ago. That's why he said it.
Some students take a little longer.
but I feel like I had to really think about it. I mean, I one of the things that people have told me was one of their favorite things. I got back into playing the oboe a lot on these videos in the summer, and I had to actually rig up a contraption where I played pedal points with my foot on an electric keyboard while I played on the oboe, and it's actually one of my favorite recordings from the summer, but it's very funny. It's like I had to get my toes I put some blocks together. I mean, it was hilarious. It was like building some toys. But you know, you've got to be resourceful. I mean, that's really what happens. It makes everybody more resourceful. And the thing that you really do have to, the scariest thing about it was, I mean, you know, we all play plenty of club gigs. They can go well, they can go badly, but they're not there forever. You know, these are there forever. So you really, you know, want to think about it before you put something out there. And that has been the biggest challenge for me.
Well, that's a great bit of advice, and I'm mindful of Rand's 15 to 35 minutes. I think we'll sort of stick within that here as well, so that we don't exceed our time. But I'm curious, just as we close, what advice you might have for students as you know, they look at what could be a very daunting future for students. How do you know, what advice would you give them as they navigate this moment and really become musicians and artists in the world?
Think 5 years from now how important video will be for gaining an audience, a chance to really plan in advance, not to have to worry about bad weather, to preserve videos for your grandchildren to see and the rest of the world.
You know, I would say take this moment and get your skills beyond what you ever could have done if you were going in and out of town and running back and forth to various places. This is a great time to buckle down. Just this morning, I had a lesson with a guy who graduated NEC as a classical French horn major about 2 or 3 years ago, and you should hear him improvise now. I mean, he's really taken this moment to become somebody who can do wonderful things and now has much broader skills as a teacher.
You could help a student to unlock this. You and Dominique and Nadelka, Eden, McAdams.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think I'd also say we've made a lot of music, we've created a lot of music, we've recorded a lot of music. And I find that in the years before we had this pandemic hitting us in March, that people's skills in listening to what has been recorded were lagging. And it's sometimes maybe it's too much, or just you can't settle down enough to think what it is that you do want to listen to. So I would say the listening part is as important as the skill building part that Hankus is speaking to, so that we can read the writing on the wall. Where are we? What is this time that we're in? And better orient ourselves to not take things at face value, but to look for dimension and authenticity.
Well, thank you all. You are well, I just appreciate the conversation today, but even more just the great artists and people and teachers that you are. I'm just really truly honored and privileged to be at NEC with each of you, and so thank you so much.